Hey everybody, coming at you live from Gear Room Central, or what's more technically known as my basement. I got tagged again. I got tagged by JW Apothecary, and I think I'm pronouncing that right. I know I'm pronouncing JW right. I don't know about the apothecary part. But anyway, it's Jamie from, and his channel's name's JW Apothecary. But anyway, he tagged me on the 5 items that every beginner bushcrafter needs. Alright, now the thing about that, that's a hard subject to narrow down to 5, because for me, if you're a beginning bushcrafter, there's several things you can need, and it's kind of hard to narrow them down to 5. So I'm going to try to, and I may give a couple of honorable mentions past 5. I'm not real sure, because I have really thought about this for a while. But Jamie made a very good point in his video, that he said that he was going to talk about 5 items that you had to run out and buy that was directed towards bushcraft. Okay, and that got me to thinking, he's right about that, because he said some of the items may just be laying around the house. You know, like if you were going to bring common rope or twine, that might be around the house, or a folding saw. You may have a pruning saw, you know, or just, you know, on and on. Things that you may find laying around the house. So I'm going to try my best to kind of direct it towards specialty items, towards bushcraft. Alright, so let's get some props out and start looking and start talking. Now that we're talking about beginning bushcraft, okay, I think the first and most important item will be a knife. Bushcraft involves all kinds of cutting and carving. You'll be building shelters, making frames for shelters, be making tripods for hanging pots over fires, pot hanging sticks, possibly bow drills, hearth boards, hand drills. It's endless. The carving is just endless. So now I want to make this point to begin with. We're not talking about hunting or trapping or fishing specifically. So we're not really worried about deboning or skinning or gutting or filleting. We're worried about basically wood carving, because bushcraft is basically woodcraft, fieldcraft, crafting things in the woods with wood. So later on, you may want to get into primitive bushcraft, where you're going to take like some flint and bust it up and use that as your cutting device. But that is not for the beginner. For the beginner, what you're going to do is you're going to need a knife. Now specifically, this knife will have a Scandi grind. Alright, Mora is one of the most popular Scandi grind knives out there. And there's other brands. There's Martini, there's Condor makes a bunch of them. There's several brands. Tops makes a few with Scandi grinds. But I'm going to explain, since this is supposed to be directed towards beginners, I'm going to explain real quick about a Scandi grind. And I'm going to go over here to the board here in a minute, make a little drawing of it. But in the meantime, what I'm going to show you here is a Scandi grind knife. Okay, has basically one grind right here. Okay, one grind. That's it. Okay, that's a Scandi grind. Now these other knives have, whether it's a hollow ground or a full flat grind or a partial flat grind or a saber grind or a convex or a concave or just any of the other grinds, they're different from the Scandi in they have 2 grinds. There's a primary and a secondary. And I'm going to explain to you why that matters. All right. This is a good old K-bar fighting knife. And if you'll see, if you look very closely, there is a bevel right here. Alright. And then there's another little tiny micro bevel right here. Well, it's bigger than micro. Alright, but basically there's 2 grinds. There's a primary and a secondary. And that does not lend itself to wood carving. And I'm fixing to show you why. As you see, I'll show you close up here. Here's a Martini. There is one grind right here. One grind. Now I'm going to show you why that makes a difference. Now I'm going to try to draw this to where you can understand it. Alright. First off, let's come up here and let's let's say that this is a knife blank. Okay, makes sense. All right, this will be the spine. This is the back of the knife. A Scandi grind has one angle. Can you see that? One angle. I'm going to kind of highlight that a little bit with a couple of extra lines. It's got one sharp angle. All right, makes sense? Your other knives, whether they have, what they do sometimes, I'll draw a couple of different ones. Sometimes they'll have a, that ain't no good. Let me make it a little bit bigger. Sometimes what they will have is they will have a grind, and then they will have another grind out on the end. This is what they mean by primary and secondary. They have two grinds on them. Now, the bad part of this is if you have a piece of wood, let's say this is a piece of wood, and you're wanting to curl, you're wanting to carve or curl or shave, well, when you've got this Scandi grind in here, you have one grind, and as you're pushing down on that knife, carving down, you're going to peel off feathers, curls, shavings, whatever. Or if you're going to be making a notch for a pot hanger or whatever, this is going to glide perfectly because you're going to have about a, maybe, I don't know, a 10 to maybe a 15 degree gap right here. That's what this angle is. And that's why a Scandi grind works. So now, the other types of common knives that they have, this is a very, very exploded view. And I don't even know if I can, I'm going to try to draw this. If you have that same angle, see, this is so hard to draw. Let's go right here. Let's cut this off into two pieces. Here's your first grind and here's your second grind. Now, if you look very carefully, you have two angles here. And so if you hold it at the same angle that you will a Scandi grind, then you're going to wind up touching right here, and it's just going to glide across the wood. Now, if you take a normal grind knife and you take a Scandi grind knife and you run it down a piece of wood, you'll understand this. Alright? Because if you're beginning bushcraft, all you're going to hear about is, ooh, Scandi grind this, Scandi grind that. Well, this is the reason why. And so if you've got these two grinds right here, you're going to have to wind up really leaning the knife over at a massive angle. And it's going to just dig into the wood, and it's not going to carve good. Alright? If that didn't explain it properly, then you're going to have to look up some videos on Scandi grinds, but basically, that's why I choose a Scandi grind. Because it's such a good wood carver. It's ground like almost like a wood carving chisel. A little more tidbits on knives, and then we'll be moving on. Alright? Like I said, the common Mora is fantastic for the beginning bushcrafter. This is a Mora Companion HD, and as you can see, it's got the Scandi grind on it, the one grind. They usually come in plastic cases. You can clip them on your belt, or you can clip them on your pack, or you can tie a cord around them and hang around your neck. Now, when you wear a neck knife, all right, I get a lot of grief over this. When you wear a neck knife, you can put a cord on there, a cord lock. That cord can break loose if you have to. Of course, there's a knot behind this. You can ignore that. But the way you wear a neck knife is when you're hiking, you put it in your shirt. Alright? That way it won't snag on something and choke you. When you're in camp or you're sitting still, carving something, then you can just have it out. That way you have easy access to it. It's just called neck carry. This is a Mora cans bowl. It's a little more expensive. It's got a different grind on it, but it's still basically a Scandi. So anyway, that's a good knife there. They got the Mora cans bowl, Mora Bushcraft Black, which is a full tang knife. That means that the metal attached to this goes all the way through the handle and out the back. That's what they mean by full tang. Some of these are partial tang. This is a Bushcraft Forest. Martini makes good knives. This is a Martini. I can't remember the name of it. It might be called a Big Game Hunter. Martini makes little bitty tiny knives. That's a good neck carry knife. And sometimes instead of paracord, you can put elastic on there. See how that's stretchy? That way, if you feel nervous about it hanging on something, it'll give. Now it may snap back and give you a purple spot on your neck, but you'll have to explain to the wife. But that's not my problem. Okay, and another one, and also when you buy more, you can get rid of the plastic sheath and get a leather sheath made for it. All right, this one has a ferro rod, which we're going to talk about in just a minute. Another good company is Condor. A Condor, some of theirs, they actually come with a place for a ferro rod. This is a Condor Swamp Romper. It's the first knife that I showed you earlier. And I have several other Condors, but I'm not going to make the whole video about knives, but I got to stress the importance of knives. So, you can carry a knife on your belt. You can carry it on the strap of your backpack. You can carry it around your neck. Or later on, as you get advanced, if you get a machete, you can attach it to your machete sheath. This is something that I'm well known for. All of my machetes have knives attached to them. This is a Condor bush lower. This is a pretty popular knife. They used to be really cheap, but they've kind of gone up in price. So you may want to, if you're a beginner, you may want to start out with a Mora, because Moras are a better bang for the buck for starters. So let's go on to item number 2. Item number 2, the ferro rod. Now, the thing about a ferro rod is, before I get into that, fire is very important. Fire, basically, it's a weird thing. Fire can either save you or it can kill you. Depends on how you want to use it. Fire destroys things. Fires kill people. But fires will warm you. They'll cook your food. You can be a signaling device. If fire used properly, is a good thing. Fire is a big part of bushcraft. So, as Jamie was saying, he was going to avoid household items. Well, not only am I avoiding household items like matches and lighters, but some people would say, now this is my philosophy, this is my opinion on it, and this is why everybody's doing videos, tag videos, because we all have different opinions. My opinion is, and from my experience from messing with lighters and matches, is they don't teach you the fundamentals of fire making, fire building, and gathering materials. Because I remember when I was a scout leader, and sometimes you have to look through a kid's eyes, and you can give a scout with no direction, you can give them a matches or a lighter, okay? Open flame now, and no matter what they do, they can't get a fire going for nothing. And it's because they have an open flame, and when you have an open flame, you just gather up whatever and you think you're going to light it. But if you have a spark, and you're trying to turn a spark into a flame, you more understand materials, and you will seek out those materials, kind of like cattail fluff. If you pick leaves up off the ground or pine straw, you're going to learn how to rub them and break them down to where they're more fluffy material, to where they'll catch a spark and turn a spark into flame. And you'll have to understand, or wood shavings and feathers that you'll be making with your Scandi grind knife. You'll be understanding more the basics of fire. And the 3 basics of fire are tinder, kindling, and fuel. And there's always a given rule you can always remember. Tinder is something that will turn a spark into flame. Okay? Kindling is something that will accept a flame in 5 seconds or less. In other words, you take this, take a flame, and you try to catch something on fire, and if it doesn't catch that flame in 5 seconds or less, that's considered fuel. That's not kindling. Okay? And if it won't turn a spark into flame, that's not tinder. Make sense? All right. I'm trying to explain these basics of fire, because since this has got beginner in the title, maybe people will seek out this video and listen. But anyway, that's tinder, kindling, and fuel. Fuel is anything that's like risk thick. because usually finger size maybe is considered kindling. So to move on, now what a ferro rod is it is ferrocerium. All right, what ferrocerium is it's a type of a soft metal that when it's scraped with a scraper, it makes a spark. Okay, all right. Now, generally, your beginner bushcrafters are going to just buy these normal little ferro rods, which there's nothing wrong with these. These are fantastic. But the problem is these stupid strikers. A lot of these ferro rods are basically the same with the exception of a few. But these strikers, what they come with, and as you can see I've got a whole handful of these pieces of junk, is they're just stamped out pieces of sheet metal. And a lot of people will sharpen the back of their knife and use it for a striker, for striking it. What I do is sometimes you can take any kind of hardened piece of steel or a broken machete or a broken knife and carve it up into little pieces and make them razor sharp. And years ago what I did is I made a little device. It was a universal scraper, and I made it inside this thing because this is good for like mashing up plant life or roots or leaves or nuts. And what you do is you pull it apart, and it's a chisel and a scraper. It's a hardened piece of steel. So with that, you can take like just even the worst of ferro rods and turn them into a sparking, you know, fantastic. Because when you get a ferro rod and it comes with one of these pieces of junk, you're not going to be able to throw sparks like that, I'm telling you. So these will discourage you. This is the first thing you need to get rid of when you get a ferro rod. So anyway, moving along, you're going to wind up with a ferro rod like that. And the first thing you need to do is get rid of this. Here's another little striker that I've made. All right. And another popular thing that people have caught on is they are taking lathe tool bits. That's a high-speed steel lathe tool bit, and they're putting them in handles and using them for strikers, which is fantastic. Now this is just a common 6-inch by 1/2 inch ferro rod. That's a little bit bigger than those little standard ones, and you'll be less disgusted with fire if you get a bigger ferro rod like this. All right, there's one of them, and here's another one right here, and I've made a striker for it out of high-speed steel. Actually, I had a broken machete from years ago that I cut up. But there's one of them. Sometimes, let me look here. Sometimes they sell little strikers that you can buy, that you can add to them. And once you've got a striker like this, you can keep it for a long time. And a lot of times ferro rods, you know, they'll last a long time. Now I want to say something. These little bitty tiny pieces of junk right here, all they're going to do is make you mad. They don't throw much sparks, and if you drop them, they'll break. I had one. I thought, oh, this is small. I'm going to have that on a keychain. Well, you drop it and it breaks. These bigger ones, the bigger ones here, you can drop them, and it's kind of hard to break a 1/2 inch rod. And there's a lot more bulk to it, but I mean that's just the way it goes. You can trick out rods. This is a little telescoping rod. You pull it out and tighten it up. That's kind of neat, but as it wears down, you can't do that anymore. This company here, I think this was called Earthfire. I don't know if they're in business or not anymore, but they made a little tiny striker with a little bitty ferro rod. That's handy for for a last ditch effort, but it's kind of like artwork to wear it like that. You can throw a ferro rod into your pocket. You can attach it to your machete sheath, carry it in your pocket, or you can put it on paracord. Put it on paracord in your striker. Put it on an extra loop so that it slides around. See, that way it won't. That way you'll be able to use it better. And so you can just wear that around your neck for whenever you want to carry it. All right. Now, a few more things. You can take one and doctor it up with some paracord and put it on a little keychain, make it nice looking. Let's see what else we got here. There's a guy on YouTube named Snap-on John. Wait a minute, Snap-on John 150, I think. And he made me this ferro rod a long time ago, back before people were making them homemade. And It's got a deer antler on it. I think it's a deer. Part of one with a little striker. I've still got it. Anyway, that's nice. Dark Matter, DIY Dark Matter. He made me one, and he carved it for me. It's beautiful. I love this thing. I don't want to wear it out because it's very, very cool. He's a fellow YouTuber, and I've got a neat little wicked homemade striker for it. This is a Gerber Bear Grylls striker. I don't recommend anything with the name Bear Grylls on it. But this is actually not a bad striker. It comes in a little case like this. And let's see if I can get it put back together. But it comes into a neat little case like this that I can't seem to get together, which is part of the reason why I don't recommend Bear Grylls products. Alright, come on, there it goes. Alright, and then what it does is it comes with a little lanyard that you pull, and you lock it up, and then it's got a little whistle on the end. I don't know how loud of a whistle it is. See, that way you can, it's a great way of either signaling for rescue, or it's a great way for contacting Discovery Channel food service so they can bring lunch in while you're filming. So anyway, oh, here's another one. I think this is called Strike Force. Some people don't like the bulk of this, but for a beginner, this is fantastic because it's got a ferro rod and a striker in one, and it has. See, it won't stab a hole in your pocket or something if you're carrying it. And on the back side, it's got a little container for your fire starters, which is kind of neat. But this is kind of more of a survival item, not really a bushcraft type item. And they have ferro rods are getting bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger. This is a huge ferro rod with a striker. This was made by Jerry's Wood Shop and Outdoors. Huge rod. They have monster rods now. Look at the size of that one. That thing will last a lifetime. That's not necessarily a lightweight carry item though. But and then there's a guy on YouTube named well, he's on YouTube, Instagram, and eBay, but he basically sells on eBay. Nathan4071. You'll hear me talking a lot about him lately because his ferro rods are unbelievable. And he usually sells blanks, and you put your own handles on them. He's got some nice stuff, and he makes strikers. And like this is unusual. It's the only guy I ever seen that has square ferro rods and hexagon ferro rods. Beautiful Coca-Cola handles. And then there's a company, I think it's a Georgia company. It's called, here's the thing, it's called Fatwood Fire Steels. And they make rods out of actual Georgia fatwood. They take a hunk of fatwood, and well, it comes from Georgia and Alabama. And what they do is it comes on you can put it on a necklace with your ferro rod, and it comes with a nice striker, not a piece of junk. And then it has a little chunk of fatwood that as you need it, you carve it off. And if you get an ugly emergency situation, you can carve it off the handle. But if you have one like this, which actually, I mean, that actually looks like a work of art to me. You don't really want to carve it up. So as you carve up the sticky fatwood right here and use it as fire starter, you'll want to get another piece and drill it and replace it. But anyway, that's Fatwood Fire Steels. But anyway, oh, some people call a ferro rod a fire steel, which is, it is not. It's either a ferro rod, or they call it a fire steel, or some people call it a metal match, or some people call it mish metal. This is not flint and steel. That is a completely different animal. But anyway, so that's about it on ferro rods. I probably spent a good while on it, but fire is an important thing. Knives and fire are very important to the beginning bushcrafter. So let's move on to number 3. Now for number 3, hold on, brace yourselves. A percolator, a hanging percolator. Now you may say, Dave, you've lost your mind. All right, well, let's talk about this for a minute. You're going to have some kind of way of carrying water. You're going to have some kind of a way of boiling water, making coffee, making tea, hot chocolate, cooking meals, baking, you know. And what are you going to do? You're going to round all these things up into one? Well, a lot of people will carry little cook pots. Okay, that's fine and dandy. I'm not really going to say that's basically something that, if I'm narrowed down to 5 items, you know, for now, let's leave this off the 5 list, okay? And another thing is, if you're going to carry water, you don't necessarily have to have, like, you know, I carry these military canteens like this, and they make like a 2-quart, and then with the 2-quart, she's over here, with the 2-quart, they have that, and then they have the 1-quart, which also has a cup inside it, which is kind of a multi-use item. All right. Now that's something great, but this is more like, I don't know. This is not really. We're talking about bushcrafting. We're not necessarily talking about survival multi-items, but if we're going to go down that road, then let me explain why I'm talking about the percolator the way I do. Now, you may have, like Jamie said, there may be items laying around your house, and you may have a container that you can carry water in. All right. You'll see a lot of bushcrafters using things like this. They'll have like a stainless steel thing, and you can put water in it. You can carry water in it. You can boil water in it. And the way you do that is this plastic top will melt on these things. So they have ways. They have implements. They have these devices. It's called fish mouth spreaders. They're for spreading the mouth of a fish, and you slide them in there and you hang them over the fire. Okay, but this could be something that you've got laying around the house. I'm not going to recommend it for a bushcrafter, okay? Now that I've kind of talked about all the items, because I have to talk about these items, because if I don't show them, people are going to be like, oh, why don't you carry a canteen? Or, oh, why don't you carry a water bottle, you know? Okay, I'm showing these options here because I'm well aware of them, but for a beginner, the reason I pick a percolator, all right, let's talk about the percolator here for a minute. For one thing, you have a percolator, right? You can hang it over a fire. You can boil water in it, or if you have to, you possibly could make food in it. All right? Here's the other thing. You have the percolator part in it. You can make coffee. All right? The other thing that people don't think about is when you're messing around with these things, if you're going to get into where you're not going to carry water and you're going to boil it yourself, well, you have to pre-filter with a rag. All right. Another handy thing a lot of people don't think about is on these percolator baskets, you put in a filter, you put in the coffee, and then you put it all together, and then as it boils, it percolates up through the little glass. Well, what it's doing, the hot water's coming out here and going through the grounds in the filter and depositing back into the bottom of the container. Well, you can, in reality, you can actually take this and just scoop up some creek water without even filtering it through a bandana. No, straining it. Not filtering, straining. You're getting out sediment and particles. You can just scoop it through the creek and actually put a coffee filter in here and hang it over the fire, and as it's boiling up through the percolator tube, it's going back through and it's actually depositing the sediment in the filter. And you're with clean water down here, which is kind of a neat thing. And I know somebody's going to say, oh, why don't you get a filter? You know, well, backpackers use filters, and they're good. I've got plenty of water filters, you know, the pump kind, the suction kind, and all that kind. And then they've got like all the Sawyers and the Life Straws and all these things. But if you want to just get down to where you're using fire, you know, bushcraft-wise to supply you with water, you know, this is kind of a cool way of doing it. And then the other thing about this thing is you can pull the basket out, all right, and you can take this thing and you can lay the percolator part in here, and you can actually bake in it. Put the lid on and set this near the fire or in the fire, and you can turn this into a baking vessel by setting it on its side. See, that's another cool thing about it, because you won't be touching the bottom, and you'll be surrounding your food by hot air, you know. And then the other thing too is, if you want to, those of you that know who Morris Kohansky is, if later on you want to get into your what do you call it? If you want to get into your minimalist type stuff, then you can set you up a survival kit here. you can set you up a survival kit with this thing. Oh, let me move this down a little bit. You can actually carry, if you want to get into playing around with the minimalist thing in here, then what you can do is you can carry this, and you can put in like a tarp, you can put in your knife, you can put in a ferro rod, you can put in a saw, you know, and then you can fill in all the extra spaces with paracord, put in a compass, put in a few other things, and then you can carry around a kit like this. That's kind of neat. Off the subject of the 5, but I think that's kind of neat. But anyway, so that's number 3 right there. Let's try to move on to number 4. And I was getting ahead of myself. There's a few things that I forgot to mention. These aluminium or aluminum hanging pots, they make a smaller size and a larger size. And these things are pretty much all the same, these cheap percolators that hang. And they hang, and then they have a ring on the back that you can either grab with some leather or a pair of gloves, or you can make a hooked stick for pouring water. But these are all no-name. They're like Tech Sport, Stan Sport, Coleman, all this kind of stuff. And they're a thin aluminum, and you can beat them. You can beat them up, throw them around, get dents all over them, and make them your own. Every dent will be a memory. Or you can get a stainless steel one. This is GSI Glacier Stainless. Everything, every bit of this thing is stainless steel, even with a stainless steel basket. It's a little heavier, but this one you're not going to dent all up and beat all up. Matter of fact, you could probably swing that and knock somebody in the head and completely knock them out. But I forgot to do that. But you got to make sure some of these things, like the old-fashioned, I collect these old Comet percolators, and they had these handles, and these just don't work that great on a campfire. So, you know, this will be something later on you'll get. You need something that hangs, that you can hang on the fire. Not to mention that now that you're a bushcrafter, you're going to be hanging things over tripods and A-frames and all that kind of stuff. So, now we're moving on to number 3. All right, the percolator is number 3, not 4. I mean, not 2. I mean, wait a minute. What am I saying? Anyway, number 4, cordage. All right. Now, if you look right up there above my head, you can see all that rope hanging up there. All right. Whether it's rope, twine, paracord, whatever. All right. You need cordage. Cordage is good because cordage it just involves everything. You use cordage for building shelters. Sometimes you can use them for tying up your tarps. You can use them for just anything. Bow drill strings. You know, if you want to fool around with setting traps and stuff. If you want to do limb lines from the side of the river or the creek for catching fish, cordage just does everything. And it's endless the knots you can learn. Me, I'm a basic knot guy. Years ago, I tried to learn all those different knots, and I kept forgetting them. And so I just use basic knots. You don't have to be a knot expert. You can if you want to, but it's not like it's a big requirement or anything. But now, rope. Let's talk about rope a minute. All right. I like rope. All right. This is this is a camo rope, and it's I think it's a polyethylene rope, and with maybe a nylon core. It's rot resistant. Sun doesn't affect it. It doesn't stretch much. I like rope. You can build a shelter with it, or if you get into a bad situation, you can lower yourself down a cliff. You can in a bad situation. This is not climbing rope, but you can use it for different things. You can build shelters with it. For a lot of people, rope is too bulky. But years ago, I got into making. You can actually weave a bed. If you look back about multiple years ago on my channel, you can see how you can weave a very comfortable bed out of rope. Rope's just got so many uses. This is a 3/8 rope. All right. Of course, this is all listed under cordage. They make a 1/4-inch rope, which is very, very handy. The bundle of it is a whole lot smaller. And then they make I don't know if this is 3/16 or 1/8 inch. But anyway, they make this kind of rope. And then, of course, there's the old mainstay. Well, here they make this is good for guy lines. This is a glow-in-the-dark rope. But anyway, the mainstay is paracord. I've used up all of my rolls of paracord. So this is a package of paracord right here. It's usually 550 paracord, and that is some good stuff. Now the thing about paracord is it's got an outer it's I think it's called kern mantle, and what that is where it's a hollow tube with 7 strands inside it, and one's considered the kern, and the outside covering sheath I think is considered the mantle. But anyway, with paracord you can use it for shelter building. You can, if you wind up in a bad situation, you can pull the strands out and use the smaller strands for things, even tying up fishing lines and stuff. But for the beginner that is just getting into it, if you're going to get into paracord, you don't just bring a pack like this with you, because when you cut it, the ends will fray. Can if you want to, but it makes a mess out of it. So what I do, I pre-cut and pre-package all of my paracord as I carry it. Okay, and sometimes I carry them in like bags like this. All right, say like for example, and I pre-cut it and I pre-hank it. Okay, and like say this right here will be the 25 feet ones, and I'll have like I'll have these. They're already cut, and the ends are already burnt so that they don't fray. Because if you camp a lot and build a lot of shelters and things, you want to pre-package your paracord, and that's what I do. And these plastic bags are what the newspaper comes in, and they tend to come in real handy. But I've got a whole box over there with different lengths. I've got like 24 feet and 10 feet and 50 feet. And like, see, here's a whole bag of I think these are 12 foot, I think. And I set them up, like I say, when I burn the ends of them, and I've learned how to hank them. There's a bunch of videos on how to hank them, and I've got a video. It's about 8 or 9 years old. But what you do is when you get to camp, these things, you don't have to worry about these ends being all frayed because you burn them, and you just pull the cordage out like this. And see these loops right here, they'll just pull out. And then when you get home, when you get done, you're going to have 6 or 7 piles of this, or when you take your shelter apart, you're going to have piles like this. And what I do with it is I just put them all back in the bag, and then when I get time at home, I'll hank it back up. So anyway, the other thing that you can use, you can carry a twine, or you can carry what is called, this is a tarred twine, and it's got like a tar coating on it. And you got to be careful with how you carry this, because this stuff will get real sticky in the summertime, and it can stick to things. But that tar on it, it's a stickiness that kind of helps the knots hold, and it also protects it from the weather. So you can use this twine. If you really want to go minimalistic, you can get you some of this tarred twine. I think the name of the company, the best company you can buy it from is Catahoula, I think. It's in Louisiana, but they've been around a long time. But tarred twine, usually number 36. They have a chart on their website of what the different diameters are. But 36 is just a basic size that everybody uses. So that was number 4, cordage. A lot of people are going to, some of the other people that do these videos are probably going to include cordage, but that's my take on it. And this isn't an item, I don't think. Well, rope you may have laying around the house, but all of my rope, no matter, let's see, you can see all of this hanging up on the rack up there, ready to go. I keep my rope ready to go, no matter what diameter it is. I keep it hanked up like this. You can see this stuff. Rope you may or may not have around the house, but there's a lot of different uses, and depending on the bed or the shelter, you'll understand what diameter it is. But you need to start out with paracord. I think it's a good all-around cordage for you to use. So let's look at the list. Move on to number 5. Right? Well, we have a runner-up for 5, a tie. So I don't know. I wished it was 6 items. It was hard to narrow it down to the 5. So let's move on to 5. We have a runner-up for number 5 because I'm kind of torn between this as to what I think a beginner needs if I'm limited to 5 items. And then another thing too is I keep thinking about what Jamie said when he's talking about, as far as you on your bushcraft venture, what you're going to run out and buy that's directed towards bushcraft, as opposed to what's you know, what's just laying around the house. So one of the runner-ups for number 5 is a tarp. All right. Now you could say that like one of these old cheap tarps right here from Harbor Freight or Northern Tool or even Walmart. The thing about these cheap tarps is everybody has them laying around their house. So this is like a common item. Now I use a lot of these cheap tarps because a lot of times when I build shelters, I abuse these and I rip them up and I catch them on fire and I burn them and I do a lot of things. So now before some people may think that this is along the lines of camping, hiking, survival, you know what I mean? The thing is when you're bushcrafting, not everybody can run out. And I don't, especially for a beginner, I don't advise for you to run out there and build a all natural material bushcraft type shelter, because if you've never camped before and you're going to go out there and sleep in a bunch of leaves and sticks, you're not going to enjoy it and it's going to be a huge turn off. So to me, I think you need a tarp. All right, so let's set this over here. Now the thing about a tarp is you can buy a cheap tarp like that, or they make these things called grabber blankets. They call it a blanket, and it's supposed to be based on the emergency survival blanket. But these things, they're like a 5x7, and they're cheap, and you can buy like 2 or 3 of them, because a lot of times if you've got one big giant tarp, you're limited to what shelter you can build. But if you bring 2 or 3 little tarps, you can have like a roof and a wall configuration, and then you have a floor, or you can fold it over and you can fill it full of leaves and make a bed out of it. But these things are good too also because they've got the reflective quality on the inside, which allows you to experiment with fire for heating, because you can get the heat to reflect back to you. A lot of people say that, oh, if you're a bushcrafter, you'll build a log wall. That's not a reflector. It doesn't reflect heat. It blocks the wind, but it won't reflect the heat. You have to have some sort of a material like this to reflect the heat. And these things, they come with like 4 grommets on each end. Let's see if I can find one of them. They're little tiny grommets. I saw one just a minute ago. I don't want to unfold that all the way. I got a bunch of these, there it is, little bitty grommets. So what I do is I add webbing to them. That way you can tie them off whenever you're building shelters and stuff, you know. But if you know somebody that sews, they can add webbing to them. But anyway, those are grabber blankets. Alright. They come in different colors. Move that over there. Something else you can do is if you know how to sew, you can make your own. You can just buy some material and some ripstop nylon and make your own. This is one that is, I have put a lining in. This is homemade. It's got a lining in it. But those are good. Homemade ones are good. The other thing you can do is you can buy one. This is DPM, Disruptive Pattern Material. This is an incredible tarp. This is nicknamed Basha. I can't remember what Basha stands for. It's something like British Army something hotel accommodation. Maybe it's British Army Survival Hotel Accommodation, something like that. But anyway, that's a good tarp right there. And if you want to spend a whole bunch of money, you can get the best tarp made. It's called an AquaQuest Defender. This is a woodland camo one. I've got several other tarps, but there's no reason to drag them all out and show them to you. This is I can't remember. This is oh man, Snug Pack. Yeah, it's a Snug Pack all-weather shelter. It's just an olive drab looking color. There's no reason to pull all these out. Anyway, that's a good one, I think. It's a big one too, pretty big one. Recently I've gotten into some other things that I've discovered, and I've wound up with 3 different sizes. Here's a big one, and a little one, and an even more little one. I can't remember the things, but what these are is these are photographer backdrops, and they're pretty cool. They're reasonably waterproof, but you need to spray them down with 3M. But what they are is they're black, which is good in the sun, and on the inside they have a reflective quality because photographers like for the light to reflect back and be more of a big even light. So some of these I've recently gotten to experimenting with these things, which are pretty cool. So now another thing, if you're going to get a tarp, another thing that you want to think about If you're a bushcrafter, you're going to be using like, you know, camo and olive drab and all these natural earth colors, coyote and stuff, because you're going to want to blend in with the background. Well, if you think you're going to wind up being a survival expert of some kind, you're like, oh, I want to be seen. Well, there's something that I want to make clear here. A lot of people are buying red tarps and yellow tarps because they're like, you know, if I get in a bad situation, I can signal. You have to remember something, okay? If you're not related to bushcraft, but related to survival, search, and rescue, there's certain times of the year that red and yellow occurs in nature, in fall or autumn. And you could actually blend in certain areas. If there's enough red, yellow, and green, you'll actually blend in. So this little tip from this section, the only color not occurring in nature is blue. You can think about it, you can look at it, look at different pictures at different times of year. Blue doesn't occur in nature. So if you're concerned with getting lost or a survival situation, get a blue tarp. You won't see blue in nature. So anyway, all right. Now I got to move on to number 5's other runner-up. Runner-up for number 5 is a saw. All right, I'm just going to leave it at that. A saw. Doesn't matter if it's a folding saw or a pistol grip saw or a bow saw. Now the reason that this is a runner-up is because this is kind of like a tarp. Okay, with a saw, it's something you may or may not have laying around the house, especially a bow saw. All right. Now they make bow saws smaller than this, and this is a regular size, and this may be something that you may have laying around the house. They have bigger saws, and I want to say something about these bigger saws here. Two things I want to say. The number one thing I want to say is if any of these survival experts say this is the only thing that you need, let me just say these are for cutting firewood. Okay, you could build a shelter with one of these, but the thing is these, it's hard to cut. It's hard to control the cut on these things. These are good for firewood because you can't do accurate notches with them. For like if you want to get into shelter building, or you know, a lot of times that's another big part of bushcraft is not using cordage and notching everything together. If you look back through my videos, there's multiple videos about me talking about notching wood for making bed frames, tables, for making shelters. There's a lot of different notches, and it's just that's a true part of bushcraft, is being able to notch wood together and make it fit together without using any kind of cordage. But incidentally, while I'm at it, there's 2 different blades on here. I want to show you here real quick. I've got this one painted green. The other one should be brown, but this is green because if you'll see how it's got, right there's a good example. It's got like 3 teeth, and then it's got like a weird scallop here. And then it's got like teeth, a gap, and a scallop. See how that is? This blade is made for green wood. Okay, like if you were going to cut down a tree and cut it up. If wood is already dead and on the ground, a dry blade just has straight teeth all the way across. All right. This one should be brown. That was the idea, but I didn't have no brown paint. You know, brown for dead wood, green for green wood. Anyway, enough about that. Let's get more back into saws. Now, with saws, something like a Baco Laplander is a good saw. Some people have pruning saws, folding pruning saws around the house. These right here, you can cut firewood with them, but it's not really a big firewood tool. It's more of a crafting tool for notches and making hearth boards and things for bow drills and making things for shelters and teepees and A-frames and pot hanging sticks and stuff. But like I said, you may or may not have one of these laying around. Now, the Baco Laplander is darn near unbreakable. When you saw back and forth with it, you just about can't break it. All right. A Silky cuts better, but it is ground in a Japanese pruning saw style. Okay, this thing has teeth set. It means the teeth are bent in either direction, and you can cut in either direction. This is the Japanese style where the blade is tapered and it cuts in the pull stroke only. If you push and pull under pressure, you can you can bind this blade and break it. All right, but this does cut better, and they make like a fine teeth or a medium tooth. I think a medium tooth, an extra large tooth, and a large tooth. And you, depending on what kind of wood, is what you'll buy for. I bought a large tooth and an extra large tooth. And then they make smaller ones, Silky Pocket Boy, which is a handy item, because some sheaths, let me look right here a minute, let me pick one of these out. Some sheaths, where are they? Here it is. Alright, this is a Tops machete. Some sheaths are large enough. This one's got 2 pouches on it. Some of them are large enough that you can actually put a Pocket Boy in your machete sheath, which is handy. You can have like a small saw and like a multi-tool, and then you've got your machete. So, but anyway, you can carry them that way, or you can add a sheath to your big knife or machete. That way you can carry your crafting saw. Isn't that cool? So anyway, and as far as these pistol grip diversions go, they cut really good, but they're not quite as packable. And the other thing is, with the pistol grip, you can't really get down on the ground because this part will be hitting the ground if you're going to be doing something. With these are 2 position. You can either saw that way, or they have another notch to keep your hand up off the ground for whenever you're sawing down low. So, one other thing is, if you're going to be near the river or in the jungle and you're going to be messing with bamboo, you're going to want an extra fine tooth saw. That's next to worthless on wood, but on bamboo it's incredible. Alright, but yeah, all kinds of notches and stuff, firewood, whatever. And so I think that was a runner-up for number 5. Number 5, you know, was between the tarp and the saw. And I think that's pretty much all I got to cover. So let's wrap this up, and I'll let you go. Alright, so that pretty much wraps it up. The 5 items that I think, or 6, that the beginning bushcrafter needs. Now, you can argue with me and disagree with me, but this is my opinion and my thoughts on it. And the thing is listen to me and listen to others. Listen to their opinion. Their experiences give their opinions. My experiences give my opinions. You need to listen to all of us and take from us what fits you. Okay? So, anyway, and as usual, I am subbed to too many people, and I don't know who's interested in this subject, and I don't know who makes videos, so I'm not tagging anybody. If you want to do this tag, tell me in the comments section, and I will put your channel in the description box for this tag. Okay? Normally the way a tag works is when I get tagged, I do a video, and then I tag 3 people. But like I said, I don't do that anymore because I know too many people on YouTube. So I hope you enjoyed it. I hope you learned a little bit of something. These are just my thoughts. I wished it would have been 10 items. I could talk for days about gear and what you need to do with it and how you need to use it. But, you know, thankfully I was limited to 5, but I squeezed in an extra. So, y'all try to enjoy life. Get out when you can. Do what you can when you can. And we shall see you in the next one.